Welcome to Keep the Game Beautiful podcast. Each week, I highlight incredible people who are doing amazing things in soccer, the beautiful game. I'm Anna Turi, your host. Thank you for listening. Today, I had the opportunity to talk with Margaret Domka. I was so excited for this opportunity. Margaret is a retired FIFA referee, and she has done so much with her referee career and has really led a pathway for other female referees. I honestly love just sitting down and having a conversation from other fellow referees. Just a 15-minute conversation, you can soak up so much information. And I definitely aspire to go somewhere with my refereeing. This past weekend, I just finished writing up some goals, which did take me a while, but I did finally get them down. And I'm excited to implement them and see where they take me in the future. I also had the opportunity to work a few games this weekend, 3 games, but they were full field, and that was just so exciting, and it prepared me for what we have coming in the spring. It was funny today with Margaret. We not only talked about refereeing, but we also talked about UWSP. Margaret is a Stevens Point alumni, which is funny how, again, the soccer community is so small. We've seen this frequently with past guests and past episodes. One thing I want to recommend is the Terry Vaughn Referee Academy for any fellow referees. The Terry Vaughn Referee Academy is February 21st, and it's a great opportunity for learning and just soaking in so much more information. Of course, Tori Pence will be one of the guest speakers at the Terry Vaughn Referee Academy, and she was a past guest. So I definitely recommend, if you're a referee or wanting to referee, you check out the Terry Vaughn Referee Academy. Without further ado, I hope you enjoyed the episode. Today's guest is Margaret Domka. Margaret was a FIFA referee who, among all other accomplishments, was assigned to the 2015 Women's World Cup in Canada. She was raised in Wisconsin and attended the University of Wisconsin-Stevens Point, where I actually planned to play soccer. Margaret was heavily involved in the National Association of Sports Officials, including as editor of Referee magazine. In addition to this, she was also a high school Spanish teacher. Today, she is pursuing her doctorate at Clemson University, and part of her research includes survey data from 17,487 officials. So, Margaret, I'm wondering if you'd like to add anything else or talk about what got you to where you are today.
Sure. I think that my whole career has been pretty exciting with the soccer, and having the opportunity to be an international referee for 10 years, being international. I still continue to be an active referee. So it's been 29 years now that I've been doing that. But having the opportunity from there to continue expanding in the sport world by pursuing a PhD in sport has been fantastic. And beyond just the data that you talked about that I have collected and looking at for officials, I'm now also working on really expanding the community that we make soccer available to by promoting the inclusion of more athletes with disabilities. So that's been a great opportunity for me.
On this podcast, I always start with the same 3 questions. First, what does the beautiful game mean to you?
The beautiful game to me is all about the connections. It is the connections that we make throughout the game, whether those are local connections, regional connections, international connections. To me, it's all about connecting with people. And I really think that this is so vital, especially now. We know that COVID is particularly challenging. We also have a lot of other challenges in our society. We know there's political unrest going on. And I think that soccer truly provides us a way to connect with each other, to overlook or get beyond what some of these barriers are for us to being able to connect with each other and see what some of the similarities are, what our different needs are, and just makes us more aware of each of us being human and needing those connections. And so to me, that's really what makes soccer a beautiful game. I mean, the physical aspect and the competition and the opportunity for so many people to be involved adds to it. But ultimately, for me, it has always come down to the connections and the relationships and us being a community.
What are actions or things you do to keep the game beautiful?
Sure. So, as you introduced, I was a FIFA referee formerly, and I currently am actually still an international Federation of Cerebral Palsy Football Association. And so that is, or IFCPF. So that is Soccer for Disability Football. And with both of those organizations, I've been really fortunate to be able to make some of those international connections where I'm working with officials from all over the world. And I can't tell you how many times someone has said, well, you're not what I expected an American to be. You're not who I thought I'd be talking to. And I think that it just goes to show that we often believe what we see in media and in interviews and from country leaders. And it doesn't necessarily define who the individual people are and who the connections need to be. And that doesn't have to be global. It can be the person who lives across the street from us, that we have different perceptions about who they are. And so that's one of the ways, is just being able to talk to different people from different cultures, from different neighborhoods, from different regions as a result of the soccer. Also, right now with my PhD at Clemson, I'm very involved with a veteran camp program where we get to work with veterans, provide them with a grassroots coaching certification. And so that makes those connections back to the community for veterans who sometimes are looking for a way to feel integrated in their communities, feel like a part of their communities. That's a way that we're able to make connections for them back with their community. And then also I'm currently a national referee coach, which means that I'm helping other referees climb the ladder and for them making connections to the game also, which first and foremost, when I do that, of course, I want to help them be great referees. But number one is I want to help them develop as people and have a really great experience in refereeing, where they also feel like they're surrounded by community members who have similar interests to them and that they have support in moving forward with whatever their dreams and goals are.
How do you encourage others to keep the game beautiful?
One of my number one focuses throughout my career, and that I continue to really promote with others, is that positivity is so important. I think sometimes in the world of soccer and in the world of sport in general, we can let the pressure of sport and competition get to us, and things can become negative, and we can focus on what was fair and what wasn't, or we can focus on who won and who lost, and who is the best, and some of the things that get in the way of being really positive. And so that's something that I always try to promote when I'm talking to groups of people and to like coaches or organization leaders or to referee coaches, that we really are able to make sure that we're positive in our connections and our communication. And also I promote others by, again, working with these veterans after they get these coaching certifications, not just getting them the coaching certifications, but by really supporting them to get out and volunteer in whatever capacity they want. That doesn't even mean they have to be a coach, but we all know that in soccer, there's tons of roles. There's the coaches, but there's the field marshals, and there's the people who are out just talking about the game. There's the fans at the professional games and international games and even the local high school games. And so just promoting people to be involved in whatever capacity that is. It doesn't have to be, all the roles are just as important. And so it doesn't have to be that you're seeking to be the number one player in your state, but it could just be that your role is truly being that volunteer who shows up when the players need water, and you're going to take the water out to them. So those are some of the ways. And actually right now, some of the work I'm doing in my PhD is really promoting mental health in soccer, and we have some initiatives going. So that's also a way that I'm promoting others to keep these connections going. If we make soccer a really healthy and mentally an environment for mental wellness, then we can make sure that the connections continue and are really positive connections.
I want to start off and ask you, what does it take to be a FIFA referee?
I think primarily what it takes is a lot of dedication and commitment, and just the ability to keep trying and trying and trying. Really, I think that any referee who's made it to the top level would tell you it's not necessarily about being the best the first time. It's about how many times you can make a mistake and get back up from it and learn from it and get better. We often say that even in our pregame meetings. We always talk to the other referees before a game begins, and we work out as a team what it is that we're going to do during that game, how we're going to work together as a team. And there's a joke in the referee community that the longer your pregame is, just shows how many more mistakes you've made in the past. And typically it's the really experienced officials that have longer pregames because you've made that many mistakes. And I would say that kind of defines the whole development process of a referee is having just the desire to keep going, even though sometimes there are certainly challenges and you don't feel like you have success every time you walked off the field. But it's a lot of fitness training. It's a lot of video watching, game analysis, and knowing, of course, the laws of the game, just the ins and outs of them, and tons and tons and tons of game experience. Being on the field, refereeing at every moment possible is ultimately how you get to the top.
You had earlier mentioned that you're working with mental health now. What is one thing you wish you knew about mental health when you first started refereeing? Sure.
I think that mental health is so incredibly important for our performance. And it's not just the psychology of performance, but it's also just our wellness and our desire to keep moving forward. And I think one thing about sports is and anywhere actually we are in the world, whether it's soccer or whether it's in our office jobs or at school, I think we will always run into people who are naysayers, who don't believe that we can do what we are setting out to accomplish. And I think that if I had known more about mental health and how to approach my own mental wellness a little bit better, I could have overcome some of those obstacles of believing in what other people were saying too much, or just not knowing how to deal with some of the stress and pressures. From the time of being an early referee and being really nervous to be on the field, all the way up through being a World Cup referee, there's always new challenges in different games, and you have to learn how to deal with the stress and the pressures. And I think there needs to be more mental health awareness for athletes and in soccer in general to help people through some of those challenges so that they can perform at their best. But again, to me, it's not really just about the performance, but it's also about, are we making a soccer community for people who are healthy and who are well, and it's really their desirable connections that we have. And I think understanding mental health better helps us understand human connection better too.
You talk about failing all the time, and that can be tough on the mental health side. How did you develop learning to fail over the years?
Yeah, I think it's I pause because I think it's a challenge to deal with. And I think like anything else that we face in the world, if you're learning math, you do math every day, you do homework in math to figure out how to do it. And it doesn't necessarily, for some people, it may be easier than for others, but it doesn't necessarily come naturally. We have to study in order to learn it. And I think that overcoming some of the challenges that we face in soccer and in mental health also takes some practice and learning about ourselves and the techniques and strategies that work for us, and then practicing those a lot. So I certainly cannot claim that there weren't times in my referee career that the mental health challenges really weighed me down and made it more difficult for me to perform. But then I would listen to advice. For example, when I was preparing for the World Cup, we had coaches, sports psychologists, and coaches who provided us with multiple different strategies for how to deal with some of those pressures. And by practicing those, I was able to pick out the things that worked for me. And they didn't all work. For sure, they didn't all work. So to me, again, it was just that really it's trial and error. And there were times that things were not ideal, but I think by continuing just to try and figure out what might work, I was able to come up with successful strategies.
So today, the day we're recording this, Tori Penso, actually a guest I had on the podcast about 3 months ago, announced that she is a FIFA referee now and joined that area. What advice would you give someone like Tori taking the next level in their career?
I would I know Tori well, and so congratulations to her. That's an exciting time in her career to be moving on to the FIFA panel. And I would tell her just to listen to everyone's advice and but also to listen to herself and her own heart. And so when you get to that level, there's lots of eyes on you, and there's lots of people who have suggestions and who have advice. And it takes some courage sometimes to be able to not accept what everyone says. And so what I believe that an international referee needs to do is always be willing to learn. At any moment, you have to be willing to learn and absorb critiques, but you also have to be able to sort through those critiques and say, these are the pieces that will help me, and these are the pieces that I need to move past, and I can't get stuck focusing on them because they're only going to inhibit my growth.
So I want to ask you a little bit about mentoring. How can a referee seek a mentor or even set a goal?
So in the referee community, there are a lot of different referee coaches. We have a referee coaching system. And so all of those people would likely be happy to be a mentor. But it also often is helpful to have a mentor who's someone near you geographically, if at all possible, because they're more able to come out to games and watch you. But truly, to me, the main part about seeking a mentor is being willing to pick up the phone and call someone and ask them questions, and not being too shy to ask those questions. People don't know what questions you have, or they don't know that you want support, or they don't know that your goals are to advance and continue growing unless you tell them that. And sometimes I think when we're in the position that we want to develop, we're too shy, or we're not sure if people are interested in helping us. But the only way to find out is to pick up the phone and call. And I sincerely believe that the vast majority of people are interested and willing to help. And if you happen to run into the one who is not really interested, that's okay. Just move on to the next one, because you're going to find somebody who's wanting to help you grow. But again, you can't get answers to your questions, and you can't get support with development if people aren't aware of what your goals are.
What do you look for in young, promising referees?
The main thing that I look for is the desire to learn and the willingness to work hard and make changes. And so I can observe this when I'm coaching referees out on the field. If I watch a referee for one game and I give them advice, and already in the next game, I can see them making an effort to make changes, that is a clear indication that they're really trying. And there are some things that take longer to change. It might be fitness levels. It might be just portions of the game that you can't change within a 15-minute period between games. However, if I come back a month later and I see the same referee, I can see that they're working at the changes we've asked. So it's not that I'm necessarily looking at who is the best referee. I'm looking at the referee who's coachable and who's going to work hard at what those coaching points are.
So earlier you had mentioned it would be beneficial to have a mentor close to you geographically, but what can referees do to develop and get exposure if they're in a more rural area?
Yeah, and this actually hits close to home for me, because I grew up in Stevens Point, Wisconsin, which is a small community and pretty far away from any big cities where I would have regular access to be able to, like, on a daily basis or even on a weekly basis, to see someone. So I think in those cases, what I would recommend is that if you can get mentors in like the bigger cities where you're near where you're from, or within 3 hours or 4 hours of where you're from, then hopefully when you get to those cities, they can also come out and watch you. So you might need more than one mentor if you want people to be out of the games and watching you. But another piece is, if you have friends or you have parents who can video your games, then maybe you can send those videos to a mentor. Sometimes it's ideal to have that person at the field, at the venue, But we all know, especially during COVID now, that lots of things are happening virtually, and close contact isn't always possible. So, but everyone has cell phones now. So we tell our referees all the time, get somebody to video you, get a friend on the sidelines, get your parent, get someone to take a video, and then you can send it on to a mentor. So there are certainly ways for people who don't have access to that. As we all know, there are some places that's harder to do than others, that there are ways to find that. And I would also recommend that if you're a referee and you're looking for a mentor and you don't have one, you don't know someone in your area that can do that, get a hold of your referee administrator, get a hold of the person that assigned you the game, and tell them also what are your goals and that you're looking for someone to work with regularly, and they should have suggestions or be able to refer you to someone else who can help you find that person.
So I think, of course, we need to talk about UWSP for a little bit and all those crazy connections in the soccer world. But why did you choose UWSP in the first place?
Yeah, so UWSP was in my backyard, so University of Wisconsin, Stevens Point, and I grew up in Stevens Point, so it was right there and close to home to me. As I talked about, human connections are really important. And with my family being in Stevens Point, it was important for me to have those connections. My grandfather watched every home game that I had while I was in college. My parents came to every game, I think, traveling or at home. But it was really special to me to have my grandfather there for all of my games. And I had aunts and uncles, and I had other people as well who come and watch games. But that was a really special relationship for me to have with my grandfather and have him be a part of my college athletics career. And so I think that was part of the decision for me to play in Stevens Point was, again, those human connections mean more to me than almost anything else.
What were some of your favorite memories as a player?
As a player, just being part of the team, that team bonding, the team group, of feeling like, we were accomplishing things together. We might be facing an opponent that was really tough, and we would work really hard together to be able to beat them. But even if, we would lose a game, just knowing that you had that group, that we were all then going to work together to make it better the next time. So that I would say just the team is the number one memory. We did make it to the Final Four one year, so that was obviously an incredible experience to get to go that far with the team. But I loved during my college years to have that set, stable group of people that every day I went to classes, but I also went and spent time with my friends. They were my closest friends in college. And I loved that, and getting to get on the bus and travel with them. And it could be lots of hours on a bus, but we all really enjoyed each other's company and appreciated the opportunity that we had to just be together and grow together as people and on the field.
Before we sort of move on, I have one final question. What would you tell me to look forward to in Stevens Point?
I would tell you to look forward to it just being, I think it's a close campus community, that it's a small town, it's a small city. And so I think the university is an important part of the city, which is different sometimes. And when you go to bigger cities and the campuses maybe kind of get lost in the city. And so that's a nice part of it. And I think that the campus also feels like people have close connections. The campus community is large enough to have lots of different people to interact with and some diversity, but it's also small enough to feel like you can see the same people fairly regularly. You can form some fantastic friendships. And so to me, it's kind of that small town charm without being so small that you feel like you don't have opportunities to be with different types of people too.
So after college, how did you balance teaching high school while also pursuing your referee journey?
That was not always easy, because Like the year that I went to the World Cup, I missed a minimum of 7 weeks of school. I think it was a little bit more than that as a teacher, which when you're working for 9 or 10 months out of the year, that's a lot of time to miss almost 2 months of school. But one of the things that I always believed in was being really open and honest and having clear communication with my administrators. And so on the day I was actually, before I was hired, even during the interview, I told them about my soccer and that it was very important to me to be officiating. And every event that I went to, I wrote a letter to the administrators so they understood why the event was important to me and what it was going to accomplish and what I could bring back to my classroom as a result of it. So I was a Spanish teacher at a high school at the time. And so having global travel just fit right in with the things that I wanted to bring back to my students, and being able to talk about those global connections and the cultural differences that I was observing and experiencing. And so that I was fortunate that it related so well to what I was doing. But I also just really valued the relationship that I had with those administrators to make sure that they understood my goals and that I was very open and honest with them about everything that I was trying to accomplish. But it also meant when I left as a teacher for these 7 weeks that I was gone, they were dispersed throughout the year, but I never had the students watch movies while I was gone, or my students were continuing their lessons as though I was there. I would video record myself teaching in advance. I would make sure that the lessons were like click and play so that the sub could go through all of them, yet they were still very engaging. And it was almost as though I were in the classroom for them. So it took a lot of extra hours. Before I would leave for events, I would be at school till 11 o'clock at night preparing lessons, but it was well worth the effort. And I believe that my students also, they could see what I was doing and the effort I was putting into it. And in fact, when I left the high school, I received a painting from one of my students that just said adventure is out there and has a picture with it. But that was always a message I wanted to pass on to my students too, was that they should have big dreams, they should have big goals, and they should try to pursue them. And I always hoped that I was instilling that in them by showing them as an example of, I love my work as a teacher, but I was also still pursuing some big goals at the same time.
So you obviously had great communication with the administration staff. How important is communication on the field as well?
Yeah, communication on the field is absolutely huge. So at the professional and international levels, there's always 4 referees working together as a team. And we typically wear microphones. Actually now in professional games also, there's a video assistant referee off the field, and sometimes there's more people in that video room also assisting. So it's really a whole team of people. And in order to get decisions right, it truly takes each and every one of those people, and you have to communicate. And so the communication has to be clear. When I talked earlier that we would have these pre-game meetings, a lot of those meetings would be time spent talking about how we would communicate and when we would communicate and the words that we would use to communicate. Because if words are used incorrectly, people may misunderstand. I mean, just a couple of very simple examples. If I were saying over a mic, for example, yellow, 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 and trying to tell the referee or trying to tell my 4th official or something, if I'm the referee, that I'm talking about a yellow player who's wearing a yellow jersey, but they're thinking I'm saying yellow card, this is a really different message. And even a bigger deal if we're talking about red, with a red card in soccer, right? And so it's super important to understand what's being said and how it should be interpreted. And people use words differently. And so that was always something that we had to talk about before a game, was what words we would use and when we would communicate. Because when you're in a full sprint running down the field and focusing on, like, there's about to be a 50-50 ball and a collision, that may not be a time that I can focus on what my assistant referees are telling me. So they also need to be able to stop and keep what they're thinking in their head and possibly tell me just a moment later after I've had a chance to observe and process what I've seen. So yeah, I I would never ever claim that a soccer referee could be successful as the referee alone. It is the communication between the crew is always what's going to make a game go well for referees.
You had given that example of preparing for the 50-50 ball. As a referee, how important is it that you see all of the game and manage what's going to happen next?
Yeah, absolutely. So as a referee, it seems like we need to have eyes in the back of our head at all times. You really need to understand the game very well in order to be looking around you at all times and be anticipating what's going to come next. And some of that anticipation, when I'm coaching current referees, one of the pieces of advice that I often give them is sit down and watch some games. And every time the ball is at somebody's feet, I want you to guess where it's going next and what you think is going to happen next. So always guess who the next player is that's going to get the ball. And I think that practice really helps you start anticipating where play is going to be. And the more you can anticipate where play is going to be, the more you're going to see these two players that are coming from far apart from each other. And you're going to see that 50-50 ball is coming, because you're right. If you don't see the 50-50 ball or the possibility for a really strong challenge, if you don't see it before it comes and you only catch the tail end of it, you just can't make a decision on it. You need to see the whole thing from start to finish. And the key to being able to see the whole thing is anticipating it and knowing that it's about to come. But it's all about reading the game and having experience with knowing that's coming. So a lot of times referees who are newer will not have that ability yet, but it's going to come. You just have to keep doing games. And the more you watch games, the fewer times you probably have to make those mistakes on the field, because you're going to anticipate better. And the game slows down then. Once you've done that, once you start learning where to expect the ball to go, and when you know that players are likely to be more intense, when you start understanding that better, then it feels like the game is slower. And until you have that understanding, it feels like everything happens so fast that it's so hard to make a decision.
I just realized we haven't even talked about why you started refereeing. So could you touch on that really quickly?
Sure. So the reason why I started refereeing was nothing glamorous. Actually, I remember going to UWSP hockey games, and sitting behind my family seats in every game was the referee administrator for our region or for our area in Stevens Point. And he used to always say, I played soccer. So he used to always say, well, do you want to referee? It'd be a good way to make money. And it took him a while to convince me, but I did it. And so I was 13 when I started. But I only started refereeing to be a summer job, nothing else. I did not have any desire to move up. I didn't have any desire to go pro. I didn't have any desire to do any of that. But we talked already about mentors, and my career could not have launched without being fortunate to have had a mentor. And this was actually someone who found me. So I was out reffing a lot of games, and I always did the best that I could while I was on the games, even though I wasn't like looking to advance. But he saw me and he believed that I had potential. And so he kept promoting me to do more games. In the back of my head, I kept always thinking, at some point, I'm going to tell him that I'm not really interested in all these opportunities that he's offering to me. But I was too polite to tell him that I wasn't interested. So I just kept doing everything that he asked and going to all these tournaments and things. And then it was a regional championship. So US Soccer has 4 regions in the US, and there's always a regional championship every year. And it was at that tournament that he took me to, and I felt like I was going there kicking and screaming and not really wanting to go. But by the time I came home, this light bulb came on, and I saw a community of referees that I had never seen before. And I saw the game in a different light than I'd ever seen it before. And all of a sudden I was like, okay, I want to do this. Like, I want to see how far I can go. I want to see I want to be challenged in the games and see whether I'm able to overcome the obstacle before me and make decisions and be athletic and just be part of the game in this way. And so it took me several years, and I was just so fortunate. So I would also say, in addition to referees looking for mentors, I would sincerely say, for those of us who have experience in the soccer world, when we see that diamond in the rough, when we see that person who needs mentoring but has potential, we also need to have the courage to go to them too and say, you have potential. Because without this guy, this mentor, telling me multiple times how much potential I have, I would not have been at the World Cup.
Yeah, I was just going to ask you more about your mentors you had. Did you ever have a female mentor or a female coach that helped you over the years?
My mentors primarily were male. There are a couple of elite referees or FIFA referees who made it to be FIFA referees ahead of me. And so kind of toward the tail end of my career, when I was already climbing the ladder and getting to be a FIFA referee, some of those people were retiring and they were helping me at that point in my career. But early in my career, it was really all men who were my mentors. I think some of that is changing. I think that we're slowly starting to grow the numbers of females in the game, and we're slowly starting to grow the numbers of female, like retired referees who've been at these different levels so they can help mentor young girls. At the time, though, there weren't necessarily a lot of females who had experience on the field, and so there weren't a lot of female mentors available. But certainly that's also been a goal of mine, is to push the door open a little bit further with the things that I do to try to make opportunities more available to women. And I think that's happening. We can see that with Tori. You mentioned Tori Pencil earlier in the podcast. And she is a great example of someone who's recently had the opportunity to be part of MLS. And so the opportunities are slowly but surely starting to be opened up.
What can a club or a league do to open up more new opportunities for female referees?
I think there are multiple steps. I think in an ideal world, we have women in these mentorship and leadership positions so that they can show young girls that they can dream and pursue goals to be in those same positions. But I don't think that that's always possible if we don't have those people with that experience. And so another way to do that is also just to make sure that girls and young women, as they're coming up, are being provided with the same opportunities that the boys and the young men are being provided with. So that means, as a referee, that you are getting the same number of matches. The matches that you're getting are the same level. They're equally competitive. I cannot deny that when I was coming up, there were a lot of times that people would say, well, you're a female referee, so you only want to referee women's games or girls' games. I sincerely do not believe that a girls' game or a boys' game is more difficult or easier, but I think that they sometimes present us with slightly different challenges, possibly. But ultimately, I think that every referee is a referee, and we need to be given opportunities to do both. And so boys and young men were doing games of both genders, and the girls were more often being assigned to just girls' games. And so I think that's incredibly important, just to make sure that the opportunities that we afford to one group of people, whether that's by gender or ethnicity or whatever it is, or age, that we also are providing those same opportunities to others too. I can say one of the things that's been really important to me also to get the message out about my career is that at several points, I know that there were times that people would say, well, we should push this female referee forward because they're the top female referee right now. Except that they didn't have the females, and myself included, they wouldn't have us go through the same hurdles to get to that next level. So maybe it's doing a championship game at a tournament. And the male referees there would have to do the semifinal game first. They had to perform really well in the semifinal game, and then they would be selected for the championship game. Well, the female referee, they maybe wouldn't give you a semifinal first, but they would just put you on the championship game because they'd say, well, she's the best female referee here. But that doesn't help us, because now we've lost that extra game of experience. That semifinal game is a competitive match. It's a great match to be on. And not only do we lose the experience, but we lose the confidence, because we also know that they didn't choose to put us on that game because maybe they didn't trust that we could do it. And so the way to, in my mind, the way to promote females, whether in refereeing or playing or whatever, is not just to push them forward because they're a female, but to give them the opportunities to develop in the same way that we provide opportunities to everyone else.
You had also mentioned age. How can a younger referee be confident when refereeing an older game? Because I know I have worked some 18U AR games, and I'm kind of a little nervous going in because all these kids are way older than me.
Yeah, for sure. That is definitely a challenge. And I remember being young and being in that position of refereeing athletes that were older than myself. And it does take a lot of courage. For me, one of the things that I learned that was the most helpful was so simple. It was look the players in the eyes. When you communicate with them, when you make decisions, the whole time you're on the field, look them in the eyes, which is hard to do. But you stand up straight, you put your shoulders back, and you look them in the eyes, and they will believe you. It doesn't matter if you're younger than them or not. And being a younger official in the players can be difficult. There's no doubt that there will be times that you face questions about your credibility and whether you're able to do the job because you're younger. But if you look them in the eyes and you stand up straight, and you have your shoulders back and you make your signal, they will believe what you say. If you try to avert your eyes and look away and try to avoid contact with them, that's when they really feel like, yeah, you don't really know what you're doing, or you're too young for this. So that's the number one thing. If you're young, don't be afraid to look them in the eyes and tell them that you know and you've made a decision and you're going to stick to it.
So before wrapping up, I want to ask you a little bit about your current goals. So what are your goals after you receive your PhD?
My biggest goals are to continue working in the world of sport, and obviously with all my connections in soccer, more specifically in the world of soccer, in order to make it a really positive environment. So that is through mental health, that's through sportsmanship, that's through helping the officiating community based on my experience. But whatever capacity I'm working in, the research that I do will be very much based in making sure that the sport atmosphere is very positive. I am a sincere believer that sport is not just for the elite, it's for everyone. We have recreational levels and community levels and youth competitive and higher levels of youth competitive. We have all these different levels for a reason so that everybody can participate. But in order for everyone to participate, we need to make sure that we foster an environment that is desirable to be in. And as I had said really early in the podcast, I think sometimes in sport we get caught up in some of the competitive nature of it and lose some of that positivity and lose some of maybe the connections even that we talked about before. So that's my big goal, is making sport and making soccer really as positive of an experience as possible, and addressing some of the issues that are problematic right now.
So I think this is a great place to finish it off. I have one final question, which I ask every guest. What do you hope people remember about your impact to soccer and the world?
The thing that I hope people remember is just that positivity piece and the connections piece. When I walk away from this, I hope that people recognize that I was doing this from the goodness of my heart, that obviously I was self-motivated and wanted to see how far I could go, but everything that I do in soccer is truly to also try to enhance the community around me. And so that's what I hope people remember, is that I worked really hard at everything that I did, whether it's in research or whether it's out on the field as a referee, that I'm working really hard, but also that it is positive, and that it is not just self-motivated, but it's community motivated and connections motivated.
Again, with the small soccer community, I'm very thankful for Kirsten helping me get in touch with Margaret Domka. Kirsten was last week's episode, and if you haven't checked that out yet, I definitely recommend you do. One thing I really enjoyed learning was about the balance of teaching and refereeing, because those are two things I do want to do. I want to teach special education, but I also do see a future for myself with refereeing. It's definitely about working out those different things, and I'm still struggling with balance now with a podcast and playing soccer and refereeing and aspiring to coach as well. It's all about finding that center of balance, and I'm not quite there yet, and I don't know if I'll ever be, but I guess we'll see. I was so honored to talk to Margaret today and hope to someday be where she is. I hope you enjoyed the episode, and until next time, remember to keep the game beautiful.